Okay, we're about ready to get this radio show underway. And I'm sorry for the lag time here. I should have come up with a little bit more of a tap dance. This is when I go into radio mode. We good, Joe? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Meridian High School Auditorium tonight on KGMI and live in person here. We have quite a few people in the audience tonight for our forum here, put on by Common Threads Northwest. Whatcom County Farming, is there a future? That's a pretty big question, and we're going to tackle that tonight. We mean it when we ask that question. That's not bluster, that's not exaggeration. There are serious questions about the future of farming in this community, and we want to talk about that tonight. We've got some great panelists here, but before we introduce them and hear from them tonight, hear their personal stories and anecdotes and information about the struggles that farming in Whatcom County faces right now, we are going to hear a little bit from Jim McKinney with Common Threads Northwest, who's going to thank some of our sponsors and talk about why we're all here tonight, how this all came to be.
Well, thank you very much, Dylan, and thanks the audience and the listeners out there for participating in tonight's event. Again, Jim McKinney with Common Threads Northwest. Our goal is to inform and educate our community on issues that are relevant to them, on our economy, on our future, on our family. We care about our future. We care about our families. We care about our freedoms. Tonight, with these guests, we're going to specifically talk about farming and the people that we've partnered with Common Threads are Whatcom Family Farmers, Whatcom County Cattlemen's Association, the Whatcom Business Alliance, Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, the Fourth Corner, the Farm Bureau, and we've got to give a special thanks to Dick Donahue and Asset Advisors for actually sponsoring the KGMI live broadcast tonight. So thank you very much, Dick and Asset Advisors. So we're here to inform you, and there's some very important issues that people need to understand. There's about roughly 1,500 farms in the county. Of those farms, about 300 that are actually professional farms. The others are hobby and just individuals, and maybe some of you here run either the professional farms or just hobby farms and are interested in the event. That farming in this county equates to an impact of roughly $1 billion+ a year. That's a significant impact to our local economy. We've got some serious challenges with one of the most regulated industries out there, and it's tough. It's tough for these guys. Farming is hard. Without farming, we don't have food. These folks need to be heard what's happening out there and some of the issues that face us and whether or not there is a future. So we know that farmers, they live off the land, they know the land, they're the ones that work the land best. So we're very thankful for Dylan from Whatcom Family Farmers and his group to come out here, and of course some very special guests tonight. And Dylan, I'm going to go ahead and pass this back to you as the MC, and I look forward to the great questions and the great dialogue we'll have.
And thank you so much, Jim McKinney, and thanks again to all of you listening on KGMI tonight. Thanks to those of you also who made it out here to be in the audience. There was a little slush falling out of the sky tonight, as some people may have noticed. So you listening on the radio, you aren't going to miss anything. You're going to be a part of the event from the comfort of your own home, or hopefully not car, because it's really not a ton of fun driving this evening, at least when I came here. Do want to introduce some of the folks that came out to talk with us tonight. But first, I do want to say, and I want to mention this again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that there has been some discussion. I think it was Dick Donahue who said, okay, we're talking about doing this forum. We want to talk about farming in Whatcom County. I said, that's a great idea. It's kind of what I do every day, so I'm in. And he said, we think we want to call it Whatcom County Farming or Whatcom County Agriculture. Is there a future? But do you think maybe that's a little strong? I said, no. Sadly, it's not. And my eyes have been open to that much more than they ever have been in the last year and a half that I've been working with Whatcom Family Farmers and Save Family Farming, seeing some of the issues that are going on, seeing some of the attitudes out there. We've got a major disconnect in our community here, across this state, and across this country between the people who eat the food and the people who grow the food. And that's one of the things that, that's the gap that we're trying to work on closing tonight. And that's what we're working on all the time, is getting people to understand what it's really like for farmers right now, rather than the assumption of the old guy in overalls with a pitchfork and a red barn. That's not what farming looks like anymore. But a lot of people don't have contact with that the way that our population maybe did 50 years ago. So we've found it very important to educate people, get people looped in, people who eat food and like farmers generally, but don't know any and never have been on a farm in a significant way. Get them a chance to learn about some of the real stuff that's going on in the field, in the barn, wherever, the challenges that are there. So with that, I do want to introduce our speakers tonight. First off, Whatcom Family Farmers President Brad Rader is with us tonight with Rader Farms, long-time farmer in our community here. Also, with Whatcom Family Farmers, Galen Smith. Well, he's weaseling into our world very quickly here. From Coldstream Farms out in Acme. We also have Ben Ellenboss. Been around farming a long time, been around public policy as well, and a lot of other stuff. So we're going to be hearing from him. Matt Abbott. He's just, what did you say, dumb Custer guy? Was that right? No, he's not. He's a pretty smart guy, as a matter of fact, and he's been around small farming a lot. He served on a lot of committees and boards and in leadership in a lot of different things over the years in the community, especially as far as small farming goes. And then we have Amanda Stidham down at the end. She's with a bunch of stuff. She works a lot with education, young people, the future of agriculture. This is kind of, if we're going to talk about the future of farming in our community, we need to talk about kids and those future farmers, whether it's FFA, 4-H. She's involved with the youth fair program here in Whatcom County, took that over from Chris Paul. A lot of people in the community know Chris. And Amanda has taken that on, so we're going to hear from her tonight as well. Each one of our speakers, just to give you a little idea of format tonight, each one of our speakers is going to get a few minutes to tell their story and tell the view from their perspective, from their world, what things look like from where they're coming from, the concerns they have, the real life stuff. And then once we hear from all of these speakers tonight, we're going to come back and kind of have a panel discussion with a little bit more crosstalk, people jumping in with questions back and forth. I'll have a bunch of questions for these folks to kind of follow up on what they talk about, and maybe some other issues that we'll have them tackle. So without any further ado, I think I maybe have said that already, so I'll shut up now. Brad Rader, he gets to go first. Welcome, Mr. Brad Rader, again, Rader Farms and president of Whatcom Family Farmers.
Thanks, Dylan. It's an honor to be here, and I don't take this lightly, the fact that we are here representing, like Jim said, 300 and some farmers in the county, and the fact that the job I have to do this evening is try to explain and kind of show with words what we're going through. And I'll start off by saying that we moved our farm, honestly farmed more years in the Puyallup Valley than we have in Whatcom County. If my dad was here, that's what he would say. So we moved up here when my dad was in his mid-50s, and the Puyallup Valley was changing. For those of you that have been there, you've seen that. Still some great farms there, but it changed. Hard to find labor. It's just not the right climate that we felt had a future. So we moved to Linden in the late 80s and planted berries, had a small processing plant, and grew a business. And I think many folks had that same idea and same dream, and that's where we've gotten to these numbers where we're at today. A lot of families working a lot of hours to buy land, to buy equipment, pay employees to be able to partner with them and grow businesses. So let's talk about some facts. When we look at berry growers, that's my job, is to try to talk about that tonight. No pressure. I had a couple friends / growers call and say, because I'm a pretty positive guy, and Brad, tell the truth. Talk about the way it really is. Don't just make it all fluffy. So maybe I need a chaperone to take me to my truck so something doesn't happen to me in the parking lot. But I want to explain the facts. The facts, we have about 7,000 acres of blueberries in this county. I wonder how many people that are very closely tied to agriculture actually know that. Do you know that we're the #1 producer of blueberries in this state? I'm wondering if you guys even know that. And you guys in this audience and folks on the radio, probably a lot, are really connected to agriculture. And that's from about 130, 140 growers. Those are pretty big numbers. And that's about 60 million pounds annually of frozen fruit on blueberries. So when we talk about raspberries, we're dropping. We're about 80 growers. And there's a couple of them in the audience here tonight. About 70 million pounds annually. And that's, as for those of you that know the facts, that's about 85% of the processed fruit grown in the United States. Other pounds are imported from other areas. We can't supply everything out of this county that the United States consumes. But we feel, of course, that we have the great quality, and we keep our customers happy. But, you know, the playing field is not level at all. And that's what a lot of us are concerned about. And we look at, you know, we're planting some, well, as soon as the snow stops flying, but we're going to plant some berries. And should we be doing that right now? That's a big question, because, you know, there's things that are out of our control, it feels like. And we look at the markets. It's a global market now. You know, back when my dad started, and a lot of you folks started, or your parents, you know, you worried about the weather, and you worried about where you were going to sell to. Now we're worried about those things, but we're also worried about, you know, how do we pay our legal bill? Because we have to have a really good lawyer. It is what it is, but we have, you know, audits that we have to do. You know, most of us that have processing plants, you have to have SQF audits. These audits are timely. You have to have folks that know what they're doing in regards to that. And then you look at the labor situation. Can you get it? Can you get qualified labor, and the cost of that compared to what our competitors are at? When you look at the worldwide market, you know, we pay some pretty phenomenal wages in this state. And it's $12 an hour, going to $13.50 next year to state the facts. You know, that's a major concern of ours, is how are we going to figure that out? What I think the big question here, the raspberries and blueberries are a pretty high labor intensive type crop. You know, we've figured out how to machine harvest those, so we've helped eliminate that. I was talking to a strawberry grower earlier, and we've talked about this. In the 50s, we had about 3,500 acres in the county, around there somewhere. There's about 120 today, folks. So, I mean, it's just a blessing that that acreage was able to be used for raspberries in some way, in some fashion. So, you know, that was largely hand-picked, and the people just came out to pick. That doesn't happen now. So we've had to get machines. We still get folks out to work on our machines. What if that doesn't happen? What if we can't get those kids out? And just a side note too, I think we make some pretty good people out of those kids that work on the farm. That's what we can talk about that for quite a while, but that is an important note. If that changes, I'm still very concerned. Talk about jobs that we employ. Out of those berry growers, I'm guessing, didn't have enough time to gather facts, probably 1,000 full-time employees tied just directly to those farms. Probably 3,500 part-time jobs. You know, Jim mentioned the fact that this is a billion-dollar industry, and you know that is taken into tractor dealerships and CHS that sells this thing, and Ellen Boss, and all those folks that do those, and all those jobs tied in. So what we don't want to see is, I mentioned the strawberry story, we got to be careful that that doesn't happen to these other industries. And to be honest with you, this disconnect that Dylan talks about, we feel that. We feel like, do folks really want us to be here? That's a real challenge, and that's a real concern. That's why we are questioning, what the heck are we doing? And we see it, we hear it, we talk about it, and that's why we put together Whatcom Family Farmers and these other groups so we could discuss it and brainstorm.
Caught me by surprise there, Brad.
Sorry.
No, you've got a couple minutes if you want to wrap up, but then we'll pass it on to Galen.
Okay. So I think, you know, I mentioned jobs, different things that are concerning us. Water is also a major concern in this county, being able to get water to be able to irrigate with it. It's pretty essential. It's pretty essential to the berry industry. And water rights, you know, you need to have them. And we have to irrigate. We have to figure that out. That's a challenge for a lot of folks. So, you know, I think that the big question we have to ask ourselves is these higher value crops that I mentioned, raspberries, blueberries. You can go down the line in the produce section at the grocery store, and we have the most amazing produce section that we, you know, when I was a kid, it wasn't like that. And those value-added crops at an alarming pace are going to move to places where the labor is lower than it is here. And so I think that's, regardless of what side politically you're on, what side you sit, I think we all have to eat. Unless somebody's figured that out, they don't have to eat. You have to eat. And it's really good to have a balanced meal and have produce and fruit involved in that. I'm a berry farmer, but I think about it from the produce section, and I think about it from even the frozen section, and you look at those things, and do we really want all of our food coming from offshore? Is that really smart? Especially in that produce section with those higher value crops. I understand we can grow wheat, we can do other things, but seriously, we're talking about what other crops we can raise besides berries. Those are things that we're thinking about. Because we have this land, what are we going to do with it? And that's a question that I think we should all think about. What are we going to do when our higher value produce section is all from offshore? Because it's heading there. And that's what we're concerned about. So that's my wrap up. I appreciate the time. It's an honor. And yeah, I'm just thankful to be here.
Brad, thank you so much. Again, Brad Rader. Guys, give a round of applause to Brad for sharing a little bit. Again, we're live tonight from Meridian High School Auditorium. Dylan Honcoop with you here on KGMI. We do have a lot still ahead here at the Common Threads Whatcom County Agriculture Forum. Is there a future? The question tonight. For farming in Whatcom County. Next up, we talked a little bit about him before. I'm going to reintroduce him again. Mr. Galen Smith joins us tonight from Coldstream Farms out in Acme, longtime dairy farm out there. He's working closely with his father-in-law, Jeff Rainey, who wasn't able to be here tonight. So we're hearing from Galen tonight. And Galen, I want you to go ahead and you know, give your backstory a little bit. How you got involved in this whole world of dairy farming, and what does the dairy world look like right now in Whatcom County? What are the big challenges?
Thank you, Dylan, and what a great opportunity to be here tonight and talk about the real struggles that the dairy industry faces. And thank you to Jim and Common Threads Northwest for the ongoing effort for outreach and education to our community to further the knowledge and decisions that we make. A little backstory on our farm. my father-in-law, Jeff Rainey, as Dylan mentioned, started our dairy in 1978. And as a lot of people say, stole the farmer's daughter away, and now have the opportunity to work with my father-in-law, my brother, my wife, and my sister-in-law on the dairy operation. And you know, I'm not going to kid you, especially today, operating a dairy farm is very challenging in Whatcom County. There's a few things I'd like to talk about tonight, maybe the bigger issues, if you might put it, that really face us every single day that we think about, and as some of you might say, that keep us up each night. Every business, whether you're in agricultural or industry, you face basic economics. And when you don't make money, you don't live to see another day. And that's a challenge that faces us all in agriculture. And I am really proud to say that, you know, as I have traveled around, some of the very best dairies that I have seen and been to have been right here in Whatcom County, and that's around the nation. And so these dairy farmers here in Whatcom County help bring a market value or a farm gate value of $200 million alone into our community. And that's a big number, and that's just what the dairies bring. That's not the support networks that we support, the construction companies that help us. And so that's a huge part of our local economy. Dairy is not unique to agriculture, but agriculture is a unique business. There's nowhere else that you're unsure of your input costs, you don't know what it's going to take, you don't know how many hours it's going to take, we don't know what the weather will give us, and we're really not sure what we'll sell our product for. If someone put a business plan together and brought that to you as a banker, you'd probably laugh. But we do it every single day. General economics in the dairy industry has led to consolidation. And you know, dairies are migrating to areas that are cheaper to produce milk. And that's not here. As we see the consolidation and dairies leave, we lose some of the strong heritage that build our communities and our values right here in Whatcom County. A small example, in 1970, in the dairy, or in the valley that our dairy is at, in the South Fork, there were 13 dairies. Today, there's 1. In the 1970s, there was around 600 dairies in Whatcom County. Today, we're lucky if there's 90. And one of those struggles is that today we virtually are receiving the same milk price that we did 20 years ago. Yet every aspect of our production costs have risen. And so it makes it really, really hard to profitably operate a business. And as the consolidation has occurred, we slowly lose the supporting networks that help support the dairy industry to give us the competitive advantage of purchasing and construction costs. So everything that I'll talk about probably will fall underneath profitability. One of the big issues is, as Brad talked about, is labor. Just trying to find available labor that is willing to work. Kids, people, they're not quite as willing to get dirty. As we like to say it, it's the kind of dirt you can wash off at the end of the night, but it's just not as common anymore. We are dependent on a migrant workforce, and for us, that makes sure that, you know, that we're checking verification records to ensure employment, and always looking over our shoulder that immigration and customs may be coming if we forgot to cross an I or dot a T. One of the other issues surrounding labor is just the demands. The workforce has other options, whether it be construction or for us, honestly, we compete against berries, potatoes, all other jobs, you know, draw that same labor. So it's a challenge to find those employees and retain them. Just recently, a year ago, Washington State passed the Paid Sick Leave Act. For us, that is something that we can't pass on. That comes directly out of our pocket. So while we, value every single one of our employees, we can't sell our milk for more than what we can sell it for. And so that's a direct cost to us, ultimately leaving us with a higher production cost. Regulation, and that comes in a lot of different aspects, but zoning and land use laws dictate where and what type of buildings we can build. Increase land values, property taxes, permits. Just because we pay more for land or property taxes, we can't farm more corn per acre. And so as these values continue to increase, it puts pressure on our production costs to produce milk at a cheaper price. We've got, through new CAFO regulations and nutrient management acts, increased buffers, reducing the amount of land we have to apply nutrients to grow crops. Ultimately, when we don't have those acres, we end up purchasing and buying, importing feed from eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, somewhere at a higher cost than what we can grow it. Land availability. Steadily land increases in value. We're all living in the same pie, and as agriculture, we're fighting for a piece of that pie. People are drawn here to Whatcom County. We've got tremendous amount of natural beauty, and with the people and job opportunities, we have housing, we have rural development, and ultimately that ends up encroaching on agriculture. And we're fighting for that piece of pie again to make our living. Industrial development, and I'm only pointing this out, I'm not saying growth is bad, but these are all competition. Even competition within agriculture can be tough. And even within agriculture itself, we compete with higher value crops. We, as dairy, compete with berries. We compete with potatoes. We compete with nurseries. And all those higher valued crops have the ability to pay more per acre. And so it ultimately, again, it just increases our cost of production. And one other thing along land use is fish habitat. If you drive around Whatcom County today and you see blue cones everywhere, there's a lot of great things that are happening with fish habitat and stream restoration, but as an industry, we compete for those same acres. So CREP programs, conservation programs, we're in direct competition for some of that land. Brad talked a little bit about water, and as we all know, cows and crops need water. Without them, we don't have a business. And the concern is the uncertainty, the legal uncertainty surrounding it, and the availability that we will have in the future to have access to water. One of the things that is sometimes tough to share, but it's the emotional burden. Dairy farming is tough. I shared that to start with. The economic times that we're in are challenging. We work lots of hours, we make lots of sacrifices, but as dairy farmers, it's fulfilling. We're proud, we're passionate about what we do, but unfortunately we're often villainized by false accusations and misinformation and represented in ways that often aren't true. And so we find ourselves constantly trying to protect our industry and our way of life to feed the very hand that often bites us. So, I probably just want to end with, there's no one quick fix-all, but, each one of these issues, they're a building block, and we have to have each one to have a profitable dairy. And as we are faced with all these challenges, the tight economic margins and the emotional stress, of operating a dairy, we sometimes really have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Is this where we want to be? Is there somewhere else we can go if we want to maintain this lifestyle? And as dairy producers, we are optimistic, and we always believe that tomorrow will be better today. We till the soil, we plant the seed, we pray for the rain, and we harvest the rewards. We're passionate and we're proud, and we're here tonight because we're engaged in trying to solve the problems of today while leaving our farms for our children of tomorrow.
Galen Smith. Again, thank you so much, Galen, for sharing a little bit tonight. Again, we are live here on KGMI. KGMI News Time is 7:34. As we continue from Meridian High School Auditorium, this is the Common Threads Whatcom Agriculture. Is there a future forum? Several speakers with us up here. We've already heard from Brad Rader. I'm Dylan Honcoop, by the way, for people listening on the radio wondering who's talking here, with Whatcom Family Farmers serving as MC tonight. We've heard from Brad Rader, Rader Farms. We just heard there from Galen Smith from Coldstream Farms. And next up on our panel, Mr. Ben Ellenboss, who has threatened to go for, what, double the amount of time that I said you could have? So we'll have the hook ready for him. But Ben, go ahead and share a little bit of your story.
Hi everybody, I'm Ben Ellenboss. Some of you guys may know me as Farmer Ben. I'm going to steal the podium here from Dylan because I got a lot to talk about. I want to tackle something that we've been talking about here tonight, but we've been kind of beating around the bush. First thing I want to say is you guys are probably wondering why I get to stand up here in my big red shirt. I'm not the biggest cattle producer in the county. I'm not the richest cattle producer in the county. And I sure as heck ain't the smartest cattle producer in the county. But what I am is I'm involved. I'm the vice president of the Cattlemen's Association. I'm the president of the Whatcom County Farm Bureau. There was a time where I was a member of the Whatcom County Planning Commission, where we made land use policy recommendations to the county council. And I was the chair of the Charter Review Commission in 2015. Coming out of high school, the only person that was really interested in a big old dumb farm kid was the head football coach at Western Washington University. So I headed up there to play football, and I wondered what the heck I was going to major in at a liberal arts college. I always wanted to be a dairy farmer. I had the generational knowledge, being a fifth-generation farmer in Whatcom County, about cattle and crops, but what I really needed to understand was my impact on the environment, because everything I saw coming down the pipe was that was going to be the issue that we'd be tripping on as time moved forward. So a few years back, I read an article titled "Planning and Zoning Fails to Embrace Mini-Ag." The author noted that extraordinary growth in the mini farm ag sector which he referred to as new agriculture. He described it as typically small acreage, niche markets, organic in sense, and boldly stated that one would expect that the planning and zoning fraternities and bureaucracies to be tweaking their land use design standards and enabling regulations that would enhance the viability of new agriculture. But in some states, such as ours, the opposite seems to be happening. It would be no exaggeration to observe that the entire smart growth movement seems to reject the mini farm pattern almost entirely. The author goes on to give examples of how planning and zoning regulations such as minimum lot size, prohibition of non-government inspected food sources, and maximizing property tax revenue have an immediate effect on the viability of agriculture in a given area. Now this is pretty dry here for a while, but stay with me because it's really important. As a fifth-generation farmer in Whatcom County and a former member of the Planning Commission, naturally this article stirred up some questions in my mind. It's well documented that Whatcom County is intent on preserving 100,000 acres of land to sustain a viable ag economy. This goal is being carried out through public policies such as minimum lot sizes, transfer of development rights, the Critical Areas Ordinance, one of my favorites, and other land use regulations in the agricultural zone of Whatcom County. This article made me ponder the question, is Whatcom County's planning and zoning helping or hurting the pursuit of preserving 100,000 acres of farmland? Title 16.16 of the Whatcom County Code is called the Critical Areas Ordinance. The purpose of the Critical Areas Ordinance is to protect wetlands, floodplains, critical aquifer recharge areas, habitat conservation areas, and to apply best available science to ensure no net loss of ecological function, protect species listed as threatened or endangered, and their habitats. The county has adopted the Critical Areas Ordinance under the authority of RCW blah, 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 otherwise known as the Growth Management Act. It's important to note that the Whatcom County Critical Areas Ordinance is specific to Whatcom County, even though it is a mandate of the state. Different counties throughout the state comply with the state law in different ways. The point of the Growth Management Act is to make land use decisions on a local level. So what does all this mean to a Whatcom County farmer? Nothing, as long as your farm doesn't fall into a critical area. But it's safe to assume, based on the definition of a critical area, that almost every parcel in Whatcom County's ag zone could be classified as having a critical area on or around it, which would then subject it to the provisions of the CAO. The CAO does not disallow farming practices. Ongoing agriculture activities shall be permitted within the critical areas as long as you play by our rules. Setbacks, buffers, their prescribed management practices. Notice I didn't say best management practices because those would be based on science and not political science. The penalty for non-compliance can be stiff. Any person who violates any of the provisions of this chapter shall be guilty of a civil offense and may be fined the sum not to exceed $1,000 for each offense. Right on down the line. I know a Whatcom County farmer whose property is adjacent to a fish-bearing stream. The farm comprised roughly 100 acres. The farmer was properly notified by the county that they either needed to remove his 10 cows from his land or face a $1,000 a day per animal fine, citing the Critical Areas Ordinance. So the farmer was faced with a choice: $10,000 a day, implement a farm plan, or quit farming. At first, the operator chose to implement a farm plan. The technical administrator laid out the conservation plan for the farmer over the coming weeks, and when the plan was finished and all the required setbacks were implemented, the farmer was left with 13 acres of land that was not protected, as I use the air quotes for those of you on the radio. The setbacks for a fish-bearing stream is prescribed in the CAO as 100 feet, and up to 150 feet is a stream if the stream is a shoreline stream, which was the case in this instance. The setbacks for wetlands can be up to 300 feet. The farmer was forced to sell his cows instead of enduring the economic hardship of accepting a farm plan that did nothing but destroy his farm. One of the goals of the CAO is to protect property rights while allowing for economic development, including agriculture. It is assumed that this is where the best available science plays a vital role. However, a quick Google search illustrates that best available science for neighboring counties and other states throughout the western United States is highly variable, as evidenced by the differing mandates regarding their critical areas buffers. When faced with choosing Whatcom County as the location of a viable farming operation, no doubt Title 16.16 Critical Areas Ordinance will play a role in that decision-making process. This is particularly true for farming operations that are dependent on livestock production, like the dairy industry. We heard Galen talk about that, so I'll try to breeze through this quicker. Washington State's dairy industry is estimated to be a $5.2 billion industry. That was a WSU research. Washington has long been a national leader in milk production, ranking 11th in the nation in cow numbers, and has historically been ranked either number 1 or number 2 in the nation's milk production per cow. Clearly, this indicates our state's suitability for the dairy industry. Happy cows do not come from California. Happy cows come from Washington State, specifically Whatcom County. Whatcom County is the leading Westside dairy county and has 20% of the state's dairy production. One could reason then that if 20% of the state's dairy cattle reside in Whatcom County, then 20% of $5 billion would mean that Whatcom County's dairy sector is contributing more than $1 billion to the state's economy. With that kind of an economic driver situated in our ag lands, it is no wonder that citizens of Whatcom County are eager to protect our ag lands. The county has long declared that it is intent on preserving 100,000 acres of farmland. They have identified this number as being the minimum acreage needed to sustain successful long-term agriculture in Whatcom County. However, the number of dairy cattle in Whatcom County has been trending down in recent years. In fact, since 1992, 2 years after the enactment of the Washington State's Growth Management Act, it was reported that Whatcom County was the home to 62,000 milk cows. By 2007, that number had shrank to 49,000. And by the publishing of the 2012 Ag Census data, dairy cow numbers in Whatcom County had shrunk to 45,000. Are you giving me the hook?
I will be in a minute or two.
The 2012 numbers show an almost 30% drop in number of dairy cows in the Whatcom County over the last 20 years. So the dairy industry is, as such, and therefore has been made a policy priority. Then why are we losing so much of our dairy industry in Whatcom County? Could it be that the policies brought forth by local politicians and agricultural advocacy groups have been missing the mark? Environmental advocacy groups have been missing the mark. Could it be that land use policies are driving out the dairy industry in Whatcom County instead? Currently, we have approximately 88,000 acres of land zoned ag in Whatcom County. The purpose of the ag zone is the production of food and fiber. The 2012 census shows that we currently have 116,000 acres in farm production. So where's the extra approximately 28,000 acres of ag coming from? The answer is pretty clear. We have a lot of farming occurring in our rural areas. The purpose of the rural district is rural living. The minimum lot size in the ag zone is 40 acres. The minimum lot size in the rural areas varies. However, the vast majority of lots are 5 acres in size, ranging to as large as 10 acres in size. In 2007, Ag Census, it was reported that 102,000 acres of Whatcom County land was in farms. But remember, now we have 116,000 acres in farms, just 5 years later. The median farm size in Whatcom County is 16 acres, clearly well below the minimum lot size in the ag zone. As mentioned earlier, there's about 17,000 farms in the county, 1,271 of which are 49 acres or less. 578 of those are 9 acres or less, which goes to show that there's a lot of farming happening in either non-conforming lots in the ag zone or on the smaller lot sizes that are available in the rural zone. It's been stated by many ag opposition groups and county planners that the issue of residential development in agricultural land is an issue of great urgency. It is a legacy that could seriously threaten the viability of our agricultural economy, as significant loss of farmland could take place and/or conflicts with agricultural uses could be created, implying that somehow farming is incompatible with rural living, or conversely, rural living is incompatible with the production of food. But I ask you, if agriculture is incompatible with residential uses, then why has a large portion of the growth in the ag sector occurred in the rural zone, where rural living is the primary use? Why is it so important to protect farmland with programs such as transfer of development rights when it seems that farming and rural living coexist and thrive in Whatcom County? According to a Bellingham Herald article, certified organic product sales grew substantially in Whatcom County. The report indicates organic sales totaled $13.4 million in 2012, up from $4.1 million in 2007. Between 2007 and 2012, the number of small farms selling less than $10,000 in product a year increased 24%, while the number of large farms selling more than 250,000 products a year declined 10.3%. This type of trend seems to challenge the long-standing notion that bigger is better, or that the only way to protect ag lands is in removing their development rights and preserving the land in large parcels. Data like this makes one question whether the 40-acre minimum lot size in the ag zone is counterproductive to sustain successful long-term agriculture in Whatcom County. We should get back to the cattle industry, since that is what I'm charged with addressing.
Yeah, you better hurry up here, because you are about to get the hook.
All right. Let's look at another peculiarity that is the Whatcom County Code as it pertains to enhancing the ag economy in Whatcom County. We've established that the dairy industry is a driving force in Washington, but let's look at the cattle industry as a whole to include beef cattle. When analyzing the 2012 ag census numbers, one will notice that roughly a quarter of the ag economy in western Washington is generated in Whatcom County in regards to farm gate sales, 67% of which is from the livestock industry alone. In 2007, there were almost 96,000 head of cattle in Whatcom County. This number is dominated by the dairy herd, but beef production in Whatcom County has historically been strong. It's a known fact that a dairy cow's productive life is only so long. I don't think I need to elaborate on that any further. Given these facts, it comes as a surprise to most people that virtually nowhere in Whatcom County is it zoned to have a meat packing house. The only place it is allowed is in the rural industrial manufacturing zone. RIMS, as they're called are LAMRDs, limited areas of more intensive rural development. The only thing that's allowed inside of a LAMRD is pre-1990 uses, things that are on the size and scale of pre-1990, which was the enactment of the Gross Management Act. The code allows, our county code allows for it, our comprehensive plan calls for it by name, but the GMA forbids it due to the definition of a LAMRD and its allowable uses. It's functionally disallowed. So the strong economic data associated with livestock production in Whatcom County is there without capturing the benefit of the harvest of the animal, the processing of the carcass, and the distribution of the locally raised meat. Imagine the economic boost that could be realized if the county code allowed for the harvesting of locally raised meats. There are over 200,000 people in Whatcom County. The average American eats 66 pounds of beef a year. As we've established, the size and scale of agriculture in Whatcom County is world class, yet we don't have a processing facility or even zoning for it that can handle the supply of locally raised animals that could make Whatcom County a leader in humanely raised, humanely processed local meats. The cattle are here, the demand for local food is here, we just have no way to connect them. This is an interesting fact since the community as a whole is a community that strives for sustainability and prides itself in its local flavor. There seems to be a large disconnect between the goal of preserving agriculture in Whatcom County and the ways in which to do it. Are planning and zoning ordinances helping or hurting our long-term goal of preserving 100,000 acres of farmland in Whatcom County? From this Whatcom County farmer's perspective, I think the answer is yes. We have a massive disconnect between the stated policy goals of our community and the people charged with implementing those policies. I ask you, how long has it been since the ag community had a real voice in local government? How long has it been since we've seen a farmer on the county council? Is it odd to anybody that we hardly even have a farmer on our conservation district board? That too has been hijacked by people who may not have ag's best interest at heart. Maybe it's time we start listening to the ag community when it comes to environmental and ag land preservation. I wear a hat that says, America's farmers grow communities. That is one of the truest statements I can think of. Maybe it's time we look to our farming roots to ensure the Whatcom County we once knew stays true to form. If enough people pay attention and speak up, maybe next time the Farm Bureau or Dairy Fed or Cattlemen's Association or Red Raspberry Commission proposes solutions to your local government might listen. I, for one, am sick and tired of having public comment and the ag community silenced by the threat of lawsuits from environmental action groups who have proven over time to be driving an agenda far from the sustainable communities they claim to advocate for. It seems to me they are intent to drive out agriculture, specifically livestock production, destroy growth, and sad to say, destroy the communities in the process. Sorry for taking all your time, Dylan.
Ben Ellenboss, thank you for sharing so much. I guess you don't get any more questions during the panel time because you just used up all that extra time. We'll cut you off. Dylan Honcoop here again on KGMI. As we continue live tonight from Meridian High School, we're live here in the auditorium. We've got a group of folks here who braved the slush outside, the, quarter-inch of slush that fell this afternoon. And we're glad to have you at home listening along as well. I do want to take care of just a little bit of legal business for our good friends of the federal government and the FCC, just to say that, and I have 2 seconds until I can officially say this. Okay, now I can say we're listening to KGMI Bellingham HD2 92.9 KISM. Was that right, Joe? Did we get it right? Okay, we're good with the FCC. Let's keep going. Next up on our list of panelists tonight, Mr. Matt Abbott, local small farmer, been involved in a lot of different ways, lots of stories to tell. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the struggles with Whatcom County agriculture from your vantage point.
Thanks so much, Dylan, and welcome to all the folks who came out tonight and everybody out in Radio Land. I always loved being on KGMI. When I was a kid, Bill Corrin was always having me on for something up there at the fair. So definitely been a long time tradition in my family. Well, my folks, my family came out to Whatcom County well over 100 years ago. We've been a part of the small farm community, and that's kind of who I'm representing here. Two different types of folks, people who probably comprise the vast majority of the farms in Whatcom County that some would call hobby farmers. I don't like that term as much because most of those folks work a full-time job and then come home and work another full-time job, taking care of the life they choose on the farm. And then the other folks I'm kind of representing are the smaller but yet professional market gardeners, livestock producers, people who actually do intend to make some sort of an income from the farm and the animals that they raise there. So everything I say tonight is going to be couched in terms of trying to do what I can to represent those two groups of individuals. I grew up here in the county, little farms from Nooksack to Laurel, ended up in Custer, as Dylan alluded to. I do consider myself a Custer boy. I've done full-time farming in the past. I started market gardening and grew produce for just a little bit there for the Bellingham Farmers Market. Moved to Wisconsin and actually built a organic produce cooperative with Amish farmers in west central Wisconsin, just by Eau Claire. Loved it in the Midwest, but as a Northwest boy, the winter back there was just too much for me. You know, I'm very spoiled living out here. I love this part of the country. But let's face it, farming is not the easiest thing to get into out here, and that's one of the things I'm going to touch on. I've come back. I was a small business owner, not a very successful one. I'm much better at selling other people's produce and livestock than I am my own. It's just one of those things. But I do happen to know a number of really great farmers here in the county who do derive some portion of their income from farming, and a lot of great homesteaders who do an amazing job of providing for their family food, livestock, recreation, and most importantly, a lifestyle that teaches so many values that you simply cannot get living in the city. So, we're here to have a conversation tonight about agriculture, and some of it is not necessarily producing that food for profit, but it is that lifestyle. It is that teaching your kids, teaching the next generation the value of hard work, the value of producing food, where food comes from, the cycle of life and death on the farm. Everything is not it's not all roses and happiness sometimes, and that's something that if we don't make a honest choice to try and preserve an honest attempt, it's not going to happen, necessarily on its own. A few of the things that I'd like to touch on, challenges that we face in Whatcom County as small farmers, as homesteaders here. This is by no means the primary one that everybody's talked about, but the regulatory challenges, land use restrictions, that sort of thing. Some real problems, some, folks are just more afraid of what's coming down the pipe. I do have friends that did sell their farm and moved away and are looking for land in a place that has less perceived restrictions and public policy that's based not necessarily on actual science and what the farmers see for the land. So, you know, I won't go into specifics, but there's a lot of things that small farms are adversely impacted by, that if you've got a lot of acreage, you might be able to absorb a little bit more. But if you've only got 5 or 10, those 100-foot buffer zones or that sort of thing, it's going to take up a lot, if not all, of the land that you've been counting on. Water rights are always a big thing. It's not as big of an issue necessarily for homesteaders. We generally don't need as much water for irrigating the garden, watering livestock, that sort of thing, but it definitely comes into play for the market gardeners here in the county. I don't have any answers, any problem or solutions to that problem, other than to identify it as a problem and to say we need to find solutions by working together. Another thing that was brought up to me, and it's something that you don't always necessarily think about, but it's access to markets, right? You can be as sustainable of a farm as you want to, but if you don't make enough money to pay the bills and to get you through to the next season, you're not going to be there next year. So for all the farms that do try and make a living from it, the most sustainable fact about farming is you have to make a profit. You have to be able to not only replace the money you've invested in it, which is pretty substantial, but you have to buy the seed, buy the materials for the next year. And if you don't have the market for your produce, like Ben talked about, if you're a livestock farmer and you run into a processing bottleneck, that was probably the main thing that the livestock farmers brought up to me when I asked for feedback on what I was going to, what I should talk about tonight. They said being able to get USDA slaughter times here, get the livestock through the processing facility, get it marked, get the little USDA bug on it, and get it for sale to people, it can be very challenging. If you're not connected to livestock, if you just go and buy your food at the grocery store like everybody else, that might not pop up on your radar, but it's definitely a concern. I know that Ben and I were on a group that looked at that almost a decade ago, and we didn't come up with a local solution, but it's tough because there's been a larger USDA plant that opened up and then they shut down. It's hard to make that pencil out. It doesn't remove the need for it, but it's just something to be aware of. For local produce growers, at some point, most of the local produce growers here have been small scale. They've marketed in a variety of ways. They've done some wholesale to local food stores, local natural food co-ops, that sort of thing. They've done some at the Bellingham Farmers Market and other farmers markets around the county here. And then they've done some what they call a CSA, a community supported agriculture, where they've gotten the food directly to the customers that pick up a box every week. But the vast majority of people here in Whatcom County still buy their food at the grocery store. Scaling up production of local vegetables, it's hard to do. It's expensive to get the right tools, to get the land, to get the infrastructure, and being able to fulfill the need for local produce and being able to work on the seasonal timeline that it's available can be very, very tough for small farmers getting started. Labor challenges were definitely brought up by one of the farms I used to work for. Say that they've got a hard time finding kids that are willing to work, hard time finding adult help that is willing to work for what agriculture can pay. There's a lot of costs that go into it, and I think one of the unfortunate results of our well-meaning child labor laws has been that we've got a lot of kids that are disconnected from the farm. They don't have meaningful tasks to do. They grow up, playing video games and hanging out in the street corner. When I was a kid, just at the point when I was getting old enough to ride that bus up to like to Shunways and pick berries, pick strawberries, they cut that off just when I was getting old enough. I've seen the generations before me have that experience. They go out, they eat some strawberries, they throw some around, they pick a whole bunch, and they earn a little bit of money for school. They earn not only a paycheck, but an appreciation for where their food comes from and how hard it took to get that. And I think we've definitely gone down the wrong road with that. Excuse me. One of the other things, and just to check back, because I forgot something on the regulatory challenges, that farm that I mentioned, one of the larger produce farmers here in the county said they have over 50 licenses, permits, et cetera, that they have to apply for and get. There's definitely good food safety practices that need to be implemented on farms, but then there's regulatory overkill, and a lot of that is death by a million cuts. It's not that one thing is what's causing the inefficiencies, causing the bleeding to occur. It's that there's a whole lot of it that comes down, and every little government agency seems to have their own take on it. And we've really got to answer for ourselves. How do we overcome that challenge and make sure that these farmers are not getting, just dragged down by so many little things that they can't keep the bigger goal in mind? One of the main challenges that small farmers have, if you're a homesteader already, the price of affording farmland here in Whatcom County is just gone through the roof in the last 20 years. That's one of the reasons I moved to Wisconsin. I didn't feel at the time that I could really afford land that I could make a living farming from. I moved back there. I put up with 3 years of winters, and I said, well, I'm gonna try a little bit harder to find something on the West Coast. But if you really do have to have at least one, if not two, full-time incomes to be able to afford a piece of property that you come home and work your next full-time job, trying to raise some livestock or grow a garden, raise some kids, that sort of thing. So for the challenges just for the homeowner, it's huge. I don't know that there's really a solution for that. There are also issues, though, of small farmers who have not grown up on a farm. They're not inheriting anything. They've either gone through local, market gardener training programs. They've become, bit by the bug that they want to get their fingers in the dirt and dig. The reality is most of those will never become full-time farmers just because there are so many challenges and obstacles in their way. And one of those is a long-term access for land. It doesn't mean that they're going to have to buy it, but finding a way to rent affordable farmland that they can grow food on for people that's got housing either on it or close by is a huge issue. And some of our policies in the county planning don't make that very easy to do. I've got, and this is an issue that transcends political differences. I'm pretty firmly on the conservative side of things. I've got some great friends that are very much more on the left-leaning side of things, but we find common ground on this, that everybody's got to eat. Everybody that is involved in agriculture has a burning desire, truly a passion to grow food for people, and that's who I am, and that's what I want to do, and that's, I'm not able to at the moment. I work full-time off the farm, but if I ever win the lottery, I'll be able to farm to my heart's content until it's all gone.
So you'll gamble to keep on gambling.
Yes, yeah.
Sounds like a problem to me.
Access to land, being able to do that, I don't know that we need, honestly, I don't know that we need more government regulation. One of my favorite guys says, how can we solve this with more freedom, not less? But I think there's opportunities for public partnerships with groups such as the land trusts to recognize that preserving rural land does nothing unless you preserve the rural population with it. and make opportunities for them. You know, if not just to grow food for their own selves and their own family, but to grow food for others. There needs to be an awakening, I think, with the land trusts, land banks, that sort of thing in the local area, that there is a burning need for farmland that is set aside for small farmers, market gardeners, that sort of thing. You know, in the end, the thing that we've got to answer for ourselves is a culture of disconnection from agriculture, from what it takes to produce food to put on your table. You know, I'm a small farm guy, I'm a small farm advocate, and that's what my passion is about. I want to see small farms all across the county and all across the country. That's not going to happen unless we as a culture make different choices regarding what we value, what we teach our children, the opportunities we make for them, and how we facilitate easing through some of these burdens and challenges, regulatory, land access, water rights, that sort of thing that the farmers face. So, yeah, thank you guys so much.
Matt Abbott, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story tonight. Again, Dylan Honcoop here on KGMI. We are broadcasting live tonight from Meridian High School on KGMI. We've got a group in-house that's watching in person. We're hearing from some panelists talking about, is there a future for farming in Whatcom County? And some of the things, just to sum up to this point, and we have one more speaker that we're going to hear from before we have a bit of a panel conversation here. But we need to have land. We've been hearing about that. It has to be profitable somehow to do this farming. We need to be able to have the people to get all the work done. We need to have the water to be able to do it. I'm probably missing other things here. But another thing that we need, if farming in Whatcom County is going to have a future, is young people who are going to carry the torch. And that's what our next panelist is going to talk about here tonight. Amanda Stidham. You're going to have to talk a little bit about your background, Amanda, and all the things that you're involved with. But to sum it up, you're involved with kids, right? And the youth and the future of that. These young people are the future of farming in our community.
They are, that's for sure. So I'm Amanda Stidham. I'm a former District 1 FFA officer, former Ferndale FFA chapter president. I was born in the 4-H world, following behind my big brothers, showing goats, a miniature horse, and a donkey. Just so you know, showing a donkey's not easy. I am currently the superintendent of baking and canning at the Northwest Washington Fair, and recently been blessed to become the Whatcom County Youth Fair manager. I am also a mom and a wife. I've been a part of the ag community my entire life. As everyone else has said, we want to be able to continue to grow our food and farm right here in our backyard. We want to be able to see where our food comes from and help everyone to be able to eat and understand as well. We live in a world where sadly 7% of people think chocolate milk comes from brown cows. Just so you know, that's not true. We live in a world where people think they don't need farmlands. They can go to the grocery store and pick up their food. We live in a world where people think farming is animal abuse. We live in a world where people think farmers only farm animals. We live in a world where people think farmers don't care about their land. Sadly, none of these are true. Brown cows definitely don't produce chocolate milk. I wish they did. To get grocery store food, you still have to have farmers. My fear is that our food will be grown overseas in places like China, where practices are not the same if we do not educate and promote agriculture for the future. As the manager of the Whatcom County Youth Fair, it is my goal to educate our youth on the different aspects of ag, promote ag and the interest in ag, teach children about safe animal practices, educate proper animal health care, biosecurity, working and learning from one another. The Whatcom County Youth Fair is unique, as we are not like other fairs. We are strictly a training fair, and animal projects come from that. The Whatcom County Youth Fair was started with the idea of getting our youth involved in 4-H, FFA, and interested in the many areas of agriculture. It starts with education, learning, and understanding from one another. Our fair has since grown to a wide variety of educational topics. We have lots of agricultural classes available in our area and FFA chapters, but not all schools, such as Blaine and Bellingham, have those. Those high schoolers often miss out in learning the importance and understanding about true agriculture in a time in their life when they are trying to decide what to do for the future. People have views and misunderstandings when they are not directly involved or impacted. I myself remember thinking, I know a lot about ag. I don't need an ag class. I probably wouldn't learn as much, but I learned so much in those ag classes that have brought me here today. To understand the many areas of farming, farm management, greenhouse growing, hydroponics, water quality, turf management, business management. If the only message our youth get is that everything is bad, don't think we will continue to have multi-generation farming or have next generations wanting to come and join the understanding of farming. As land and equipment prices continue to rise, government regulations have gone through the roof. New entrants have a hard time paying the initial setup costs, permits, farm plans, just to mention a few things. When we see our local farms shutting down one by one, fined or struggling because of local groups, we have to give the next generation hope, and what we're providing them is false hope for a future of agriculture in Whatcom County. I know firsthand raising animals and farming gives you work ethic, education, values, leadership, understanding, responsibility, compassion, business management, farm management, and many more lifelong lessons and skills. We see our current ag color is now called gray, as many farmers are aging. How do we get our youth and future generations interested in farming or ag if all they see is farmers struggling with regulations put on place by well-intended government workers who on paper can implement change but hardly ever have firsthand experience? We see so many local families struggling and no longer able to even handle animal projects due to the burdensome of Whatcom County regulations. This is true for even myself on my 10-acre seasonal creek property. One problem keeping young people away is the media-driven perception. We're struggling to engage with these youth, and without them, our industry and farmlands strictly will not survive. We have government and people voting and fighting us on all issues that really, they just don't understand. If we come together and we're given a chance to work together, we will see that we probably aren't that far apart. We all have basic needs and wants. I like to eat, and I'm sure you all do too. How we get there is just a different story. People are going to go for the job in town where they can work 5 days a week and have weekends off. I know that was my goal when I graduated college. Then reality hit. This lifestyle is not for me, nor do I want my neighbor living right next door. We need to encourage them to come back to our lifestyle, understand the differences, and see the benefits we all receive from farming, supporting local farms, and working together. As someone who's been lucky enough to grow up in a farming family, who spent my entire life working with public, answering questions about my projects or my animals, sharing my experiences and knowledge with others, and still learning daily, I have benefited greatly from programs like 4-H and FFA. I have learned firsthand that raising animals is hard work. It's not easy, but the value, the work ethics, the compassion, and the understanding for others is what has led me here tonight. I want our next generation to be able to do the same thing that I've been blessed to experience. We want to encourage and educate others on the benefits we all can gain from farming and working together. If both sides of the aisle will come together, talk and educate, and understand from one another, we will learn that we all want the same things. We want a quality of living, we want fresh and local products, we want clean waters, and we want to care for our future. But how we get there, understanding education, and the next generation need to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda Stidham. Am I saying that right? I know, I apologize. Your name was spelled wrong
You got it,
Okay.
Stidham.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amanda, for the stuff that you're doing and for sharing here tonight. I do want to get into a little bit of conversation with all these folks. We don't have a ton of time to be able to do it, but we're going to try our best to cover some of these things. I don't know how much we can break this down into rough categories or exactly where we want to start. I do have a few questions going back. Let's go back to, well, this is a tough one, and I understand that the state Senate right now or this evening has been voting on something that's related to this issue. But let's talk about labor. It's a tough one. It's a scary one. So I want to go first to Brad here, and I'll be ready to, if others of you on the panel want to weigh in on this issue. But Brad, what's it going to take to change this equation? Because there's a question right now, will Whatcom County agriculture have a future if we can't have enough people, wherever they come from, to get the harvest in, to get the job done here?
Well, speaking specifically about berries, mentioned it earlier, we've mechanized about as much as we can. We still need a great deal of labor to harvest these crops every year. It's getting more and more difficult, and it's a total disconnect, I believe. And Dylan mentions what's going on in Olympia. There was a certain bill that discussed the word slavery, and
Which is offensive, may I add. Incredibly offensive.
I don't even know what that. It makes me pretty emotional to even think about that, because I grew up with a lot of the guys that work for us, and one of them came to visit us. He actually stayed down in Sumner, and he came up. He's making some changes in his life. He came up to visit. We had such good discussion about when I was about 7 and growing up together, and his life. I mean, these guys, they're part of our family. They're part of our community. We're partners in what we do, and that's highly offensive to farmers. And I think it's just, I'm hoping it's a major misunderstanding. I think one of the things we've learned with different groups that we've been working with and organizing and talking together is that it pays to sit across the table from some of these folks, even though it is very, very difficult to keep our cool. But I invite them up. I would like to invite them up, because obviously they do not understand the relationship that we have with the folks that work with us. And they don't, when they go into the grocery store, they don't know what it took to get that product onto that shelf. It's obviously, it's obvious. I can't explain it any other way. So that bill that went through that says that we need to report to our customers when there's some incident on our farm, I mean, wow. I can't think of any other more offensive legislation that could be going through. It seems so like a waste of time, and I do invite them up. One of the things we've done with Whatcom Family Farmers is discuss things that the dairy farmers are going through, the berry farmers, sweet potato, other crops. The last thing we want to do is sit in a room and talk and just hang out and discuss issues. We'd rather be farming, but we have to be there. So for those of you that, there was an article in the Tribune about, Whatcom Family Farmers doing this and that. Come on out, let's talk, because I don't appreciate thinking that we enjoy sitting there. We're doing that because we're trying to pass these farms on to the next generation, and that's what we feel like is very important. So if you got some other ideas, come out and share them. That's where we're focused right now.
Brad, thank you for sharing on that. The perception is, well, people are trying to get rich quick off of their labor. They don't want to pay livable wages, but they want to make a lot of money, and they're getting rich basically off of the backs of poor workers. And I just wanted to follow up with Brad a little bit. I see he lost his microphone there, but some people listening to this may say, well,
my heart rate's going up, so I
Yeah,
needed to
yeah.
get rid of the mic.
But some people listening here tonight may say, well, you have, a good relationship with your employees, but is that true of others? Well, is that really what's good? Maybe you're just an outlier. What's your response to that?
It's not true. It's not only our farm. You aren't going to get people to work year in and year out if you're mistreating them. There's no way. And I can't think of anything that's farther from the truth, to be honest. I don't. It's hard to even discuss, to be honest with you, because I feel, when we're working together in the fields, it feels like a partnership, and I value what those folks do for us, their families. I've seen some of them work for us, and then I see their kids working in the community, doing other things. They've been able to make a life for themselves here. That's awesome. At the end of the day, if we break even, we've been able to provide a wage to folks that have been able to grow their families and do other things, regardless of where they came from, and regardless of who their parents are or anything. If we can break even at the end of the day and do those types of things, hey, I think we're
Matt, do you have
winning.
something on that one? Sorry, not to interrupt, Brad, but is that Ben giving me the eye there too? You want to weigh on this real quick? I do want to talk to Galen about this briefly as well, because he mentioned labor being a concern in the dairy community as well. But Ben,
Yeah,
you got a comment on this as well.
I was just going to say it all goes back to that hat that I wear daily. America's farmers grow communities. It's a true statement. We're family farms. The people we work with, they're our families, they're our friends, they're our neighbors, our kids go to school together. It's a community.
And Galen Smith as well, you mentioned labor being a question mark for you guys as well in dairy.
Well, labor is always an issue, Dylan, but our dairy, and I can echo that for other dairy farms. We have employees that have been with us for 10 years, for 15 years, for 25 years. These guys have options, but we try to pay. Our goal is to pay these guys, just like Brad said, competitive wage. And at the end of the day, if we can break even, we're happy. We're doing what we love, and these employees have options. So when we hear the word slave labor come from Seattle, it does get my heart rate up, and it's quite offensive. Whatcom County, most all of our producers ship to Dairy Gold. Dairy Gold does third-party audits. When we sell to Nestle, to other large companies, they want to know, how our employees are being treated. And so we have to verify that. But behind all of that, really it's just it's the friendship that we have with our employees, and that we respect them as people, and at the end of the day, we all have to go home and make a profitable living.
Galen, thanks for sharing. And again, we're here on KGMI News Talk 790. I'm Dylan Honcoop here at Meridian High School auditorium tonight with Common Threads. And again, a big thanks to Asset Advisors and Dick Donahue for making the radio broadcast of this possible tonight. So those of you listening along at home can be with us, as well as those who are in attendance here in the auditorium. We just took on one big hairy issue with labor. Let's tackle another. Water in Whatcom County and the future of farming. There's a big question mark there. Can somebody explain, even before we get into maybe talk about solutions, what's the real question mark there with Ben really wants to say something about this. Okay, Ben, from your perspective, what is the real issue with water here in Whatcom County?
So I just I'm speechless about it, but I always try to go to a common sense solution. And I think in my mind, if we don't have enough water in Whatcom County for agriculture, where in these great United States do we have enough water?
I think that's a valid question, but
So
it's also a question of when we have the water and how we manage the water. I mean, there's a lot to it, as you know.
And there's science to it, how old the science is. These
By
are
the
all
way,
questions.
mention, you talk about your education. A lot of people don't realize your educational background.
Yeah, so I mentioned
This is why you're such a nerd about this stuff.
Yeah, I'm a nerd about this stuff because I went to Huxley College of the Environment. I have a degree in natural sciences, a minor in environmental studies, and a minor in geography. And I'm 1 credit away from a minor in English, which is why I'm so long-winded, maybe. But I went to school with most of the people that I see at planning and developments, the planning and development office. I went to school with a lot of the people that I run into that are opposition to possibly the groups that I'm involved with. And I was there in class when we went over this stuff. I took water quality with them, and you know, environmental systems and all of the education that they have. And it's interesting to me that they came away from it thinking that ag was the problem, and I came away from it reinforced that the ag lands are the solution. I think where it gets sticky, and you know, somebody might put a tinfoil hat on me, but there is a lot of money that's generated through grants to create and perpetuate problems, whether real or perceived. But I think that the ag community is full of solutions. We just need to make sure that the people that want to perpetuate things that may or may not be true, I'm just going to go right out and say it, they've taken over our local government. They've placed their people, they've used our tax dollars to influence our system, and that's why you see a Whatcom County Council that hasn't seen a farmer on it in I don't know how many decades. That's why you see an ag advisory board that doesn't exactly represent agriculture the way I see agriculture as the president of the Farm Bureau. And until we can get back to these local land use policies, they're nonpartisan issues.
Yeah.
The Whatcom County Council is a nonpartisan board, and we keep dragging it into the weeds where it doesn't.
I want to take it. You know, I want to bring us back to specifically this water issue, though, too. And Brad, I don't know if you want to take a stab at it. It's a huge, difficult issue. There's a lot of people I'm seeing even in the audience here who I know different parts of this or have a view on the whole of this. The issue with water, though, to summarize, is water is fish habitat, right? That's what it comes down to, and that's the concern for preserving the water in our streams. And then the concern is preserving the water in our aquifers as well. And the question is, what is the connection between the two? And it just gets really technical from there. But how do you talk about the future and what we need to do with water access in this community to ensure that we can keep farming here? Brad.
I think we've made it clear that agriculture is an extremely important part of our local economy. So, to Ben's point, you know, we have a lot of rainfall. We have a massive aquifer. I am not an expert in this. There's others that know way more than me, but we have been spending a lot of time getting together and talking amongst ourselves with the tribes to try to figure out what we can do. To Dylan's point, we farm along Fish Trap Creek. We've cleaned it, the blackberries, we've cleaned those out, we planted trees. You know, there's conversations about groundwater to in stream during, there's certain times of the years when those streams get low. It's not good for the fish. We want to try to figure that out so we all want to be here together. So what can we do? And that's an idea. There's some work that's been done on that the last couple of years with grants. Mayberry family has done some work. And can we do that? Can we figure out how to get groundwater into those aquifers to help with the fish? I think we can. Just going to take more time. As far as the shellfish beds in the bays, work's being done. It's improving. Once again, not an expert on that, but I've heard more about that as a berry farmer in the last few years, just because we're getting together and we're talking, than I ever had in my previous years of being involved. So for those of you that, we're all working together on this, berry, dairy, potatoes, the whole deal. So we're working on it. You can tell I'm not an expert by how I'm talking about it, but we have water. We're looking at aquifers, studying that aquifer. There's a lot of dollars being spent. So I feel like it's going to work. It's just we need help from Olympia and other places to maybe loosen up some of the hold. So hopefully that gives us some ideas.
Anybody else on this big, hairy issue of water, and in particular water access? We haven't really jumped too much into the water quality issue, and that's another important thing. No takers on this. It's a tough one. It's huge, and Brad is right. From my understanding of it, there are a lot of people who have a lot of good solutions, and differing, diverse groups who are actually agreeing on these things. And unfortunately, in some of these cases, we just have state laws standing in the way of doing the right thing, which is unfortunate. We need some action down there on it. But we also need more conversation between groups to really understand where we're coming from, what we're trying to accomplish, and we need, in some cases, I think, a really good look at the science on some of these issues, that there are some assumptions that are just, that people are running with. Those kinds of things are meant to be challenged, aren't they? I think there are some important questions to be asked, but we don't need to get into all the technical stuff. Kind of in the same vein, because water and water supply, water quantity, is really a fish habitat issue. Let's talk about conservation efforts as well. You talked about the blue cones, the crep trees, Galen, and I don't know, Matt, you didn't talk about that. Do you have any perspective on the conservation efforts in this community from the perspective of small farms and what can be done there, and the challenges where if you only have 2 acres and a lot of that is really a buffer, how much do you even have left, and what's the right way to protect the stream and the fish, but at the same time make that land productive as far as feeding people in our community?
Well, Dylan, the average small farmer homesteader, I would say, is usually pretty vitally interested in that. Most of them want to not only make the land their residence, their place to raise a family, place to raise food for themselves and for their neighbors, but also a place that honors the livestock or the wildlife, the habitat that came before them, and take care of the land. Most people come with a stewardship ethic just ingrained in them, and say, that we want to do the right thing. Now, the question of what the right thing is sometimes can be highly variable. I do think they've got some great people there at the Whatcom County Conservation District. Definitely in recent years, they've got some more folks that are more farmer background and minded. So some of the things they're coming out with the farm plans, I think can be positive. I think there's been some issues in the past where they've, the main thing is people have put out recommendations and guidelines and regulations and that sort of thing that weren't necessarily based on what I would call common sense. I think they're, somebody sat down and wrote something up someday, and it didn't really apply. It didn't really, wasn't tailor-made to the certain area, the critical area there that they're talking about. So, you know, I think a lot of that the landowners are definitely on board with. It's just a matter of finding a good common sense balance between the regulation part of it, what I would call the bureaucrat part of it, and the landowner there.
Matt, you mentioned the Whatcom Conservation District, and I promised Annika that I'd put in a plug. The Whatcom Conservation District Small Farm Expo happening Saturday this weekend at the Northwest Washington Fairgrounds. So everybody feel free to come check that out. I know, Ben, you want to talk really, really bad. I see you, but I'm gonna skip you, and I'm gonna go to Amanda, because Amanda, you mentioned some issues with, you know, educational opportunities being missed. What's going? You said you have your own situation. Do you want to tell a little bit more of the story? What's going on with that, or maybe at least talk in general terms of what some of the stumbling blocks are to being able to have kids, you know, raise a pig or something like that?
Yeah, so my own family, I have 2 little boys. Well, I guess they're not too little, they're 14 and 10. My son goes to a high school that doesn't have an FFA chapter. As someone that's bled the blue corduroy, that breaks my heart. To not be able to have him have an agricultural class in high school and understand all of that. I had a conversation with one of his friends the other day, and he goes, "Why do you do this?" He goes, "Do you make lots of money?" I go, "Seriously? I'm not paid." He goes, "Why would you do it?" I go, "Because the youth are our future. If we don't start connecting with them, we will not have farms. We will not have local food grown. We will not have a future. They are our future." And that's why I'm passionate about getting them involved, figuring out everything. There's technology in agriculture. Combine their little smartphones with agriculture. There's so much knowledge that could be gained if we can share it. That's why I'm passionate about it.
What about some of the restrictions that are making it hard for kids to be able to do like a hog raising project or something like that?
So when you think small farm, a kid wants to bring their pig to fair. That goes through what they call a livestock auction. But oftentimes, in order to do that, they have to have a farm plan. Do you really think that your parents, for your one pig project, are going to make a farm plan? I don't think so, because that stays with your property. I know I'm not about making a farm plan. That's why my kids don't have pigs.
For one pig.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Ben, I'll give you just a few seconds, even though, you know, your quota is pretty
I know,
much
I
burned
used
up,
all my quota, but, you know, we talk about critical areas ordinances, we talk about land use policy, and on my time on the Planning Commission, I just scratched my head about this stuff because a lot of it is so counterintuitive to what is happening in our ag lands and what is good for our ag lands. And the farm plan for one pig is just overreach like you couldn't even imagine. And like I mentioned in my dissertation, this stuff is mandated by the state. And it's not that we're against regulation in the ag community, it's that we're against bad regulation. And we're seeing a lot of bad regulation, like the slavery bill, for lack of a better term, and it comes from that disconnect. Like I mentioned, what you see in Whatcom County isn't necessarily what you have in Skagit County, isn't necessarily what you have in Island County. And when you have a county like Whatcom County that is so, has such a viable, vibrant ag economy, the fact that the environment that we've gotten ourselves into is so disconnected is really a shame. It's really a shame that you can't have a pig on your property because that farm plan's gonna shackle you for however many generations that it's there. or that the farmer I talked about earlier had 100 acres of productive land and can't even have 10 cows on it, because if he did, he gets shrunk down to 13 acres. We can have solutions that are workable on both sides. A lot of the issues that occur in the ag land as far as water quality and those types of things are people that they're not willful violations, it's misunderstanding. And so when Brad talks about outreach and learning, you know, it's a shame that the Conservation District has gotten so politicized, because the Conservation District is there to help with people who have you know, when there is that type of misunderstanding. But what we've done is we've bred this this environment of mistrust, where the landowners don't trust the Conservation District. They don't trust that planning and development is there to help them. They don't trust that the county council is looking for workable solutions, because it's gotten so politicized and so
that's not
out
good
of
for
whack.
me. That's not good from either direction.
And that's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
That's not good for water quality. That's not good for the ag economy. That's not good for the people in Bellingham who want to buy Farmer Ben's meat, but they can't now because he doesn't want to ship his calf that was born on his farm, raised on his farm, then ship it to Moses Lake to have it USDA slaughtered and then brought back. They don't want that kind of carbon footprint. And guess what? I don't want to put my animal through that trip.
Another issue, conservation, talking about all the work that farmers have done with regard to that, and back to the blue cones that Galen mentioned earlier. That's kind of the symbol of some of these streamside restoration projects, and there have been a lot of other things done. But you talk about the competition for land, Galen. Does that mean, I'm play a little devil's advocate here with you, does that mean that farmers don't want to keep doing that stuff?
Well, Dylan, I can tell you from our own personal experience, you'll find blue cones on our property. So I really think that it's a balance. It's a balance between providing habitat, providing natural areas that, you know, historically have been there. But it's also a balance of finding profitable ag ground to produce a product. I can tell you, as you know, seeing a lot of projects implemented in the South Fork Valley, they continue to get better and better. But it takes a conscientious effort when things, tree projects, for instance, habitat projects, are planted, to do them in mind with agriculture. We don't have to put in odd-shaped corners and run things out into the middle of the fields. Projects can be done that are compatible with agriculture, but it takes a conscientious effort to do that. And, you know, along with the Conservation District, I think the dairy industry is always willing to find a sustainable solution. And the technical support that the Conservation District provides for our dairy industry is first class. If you go around to other counties, Whatcom County is revered as one of the top counties for their Conservation District for the technical support that they provide to our agricultural community. So, and part of that is that producers here want to be involved and want to do a better job. So to say, you know, one project is better than the other, it certainly is. And as we look around, you know, 20 years ago, or I shouldn't say 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I can look back and remember seeing a field in the middle of nowhere that got planted with 40 acres worth of trees because we needed to spend the money, to today responsible projects that coexist with agriculture as well as stream restoration and habitat.
You were on TV last night. Talk a little bit about that project too. I just want you to touch on that, what you guys are doing with water and water quality and water quantity, all in that project in partnership with Regenis and others. Pretty cool stuff.
It is a bit all-encompassing project, and you know, we are really blessed to be able to represent the dairy community with this project. This is a state project, Washington State Conservation Commission. So we were awarded $1 million grant in partnership with Regenis and the Whatcom County PUD district. So we are taking, at this point through the project, we're taking about 30,000 gallons of liquid manure a day, processing all of the solids out of that manure and then taking what is left, usually around 20,000 gallons, extracting through filtration, which is reverse osmosis and nanofiltration, extracting out the concentrates, which turn out to be about 7,000 gallons, and ultimately ending up with 13,000 gallons of clean water that will be returned to the South Fork to enhance in-stream flows.
And this is a good fit for you guys out there in Acme because you get so much rain, which is a storage problem for you, right?
I've always said that. We don't have a nutrients problem, we have a rainwater problem. So one valley over and we get almost twice the rain. So we're somewhere in that 70 plus inches every single year. So, you know, to try and store that in our lagoons becomes an issue. So for us to be able to remove it, you know, it's just a win all around. Now we're transporting concentrates, we're applying nutrients, a lot less gallons per acre, more precisely, less chance of runoff, and yeah, it's in my aspect or in my vision, it's a win all around.
And it's one of a lot of different projects, all in the same vein, whether here locally, and a lot of them are locally, but around the state too.
And to really emphasize that it is a pilot project to show what is possible. So, you know, I think I said it last night. This may not be something that's applicable for every single dairy, but it definitely shows what is possible. And you know, if your dairy finds a need for removing water, this may very well be an option for you.
Again, we are live here on KGMI from Meridian High School Auditorium. I'm Dylan Honcoop, and we've been talking about Whatcom County agriculture. This is a forum put on by Common Threads. If you're just tuning in, we've got a group of people live in the auditorium with us here as well, talking about the future of farming in Whatcom County and some of the obstacles to that. We're running short on time quickly here, so I want to just kind of open it up. I don't know if we want to go down the line and make everybody say one more thing if they don't have something to say. I guarantee you that Ben has more to say. So yes, Ben, we will give you a chance to have a last word. But before Ben gets a chance, maybe does anybody, what are we missing here? I mean, there's so much that we could be talking about. There's so much detail that we could be going into on these issues. If you just had another, 30 seconds or a minute here, what's on your mind that we're missing here tonight?
Dylan, I'd really like to echo what Amanda was talking about. You know, the average age of the American farmer is somewhere in that 60s time frame, and they're not getting any younger. In the next 10, 15 years, there's going to be a tremendous amount of farmland that's being transferred. And the problem is, unless you have cultivated that love and interest in agriculture and have made it possible for them to see some success with that so they don't move off into other trades, other industries, that sort of thing, you are not going to see the next generation of American farmers take hold of that land and grow food for their communities. This is a question we have to answer for ourselves as a culture, is we really don't want that food coming from far off distant places. Some of it is great. We love international trade. Everybody loves bananas and avocados and that sort of thing. But for our own national security, for our local food security, you want as much food as possible coming from your local areas. Just as the same as I don't want to ship, local produce down to California or east of the mountains or to the eastern side of the U.S. I don't necessarily want to bring in beets that could be grown locally in the middle of the summertime from far off places if we can get the local farmers to grow those and provide to the local economy. Food, they talk about food miles, that sort of thing. Local agriculture is true homeland security, if you want to think about it. So how are we going to, as a culture, change the way that we value agriculture in our communities? In the 20s and the 30s, most people in America had a much greater connection with food, with agriculture, than what our parents did in the 60s and 70s. And so we're at that crossroads where there's a paradigm shift that is going to happen. We're either going to continue down this road of having other people, so to speak, grow our food, or we're going to change course and say we're going to take direction. We're going to change course here and make it more possible for local farmers to get started, make it more possible for that younger generation to get involved. When I farmed in Wisconsin with the Amish farmers there, one of the neat things that I saw in their community is that as the older generation got, you know, as they progressed and the kids grew up, there's only so much farmland to go around, and the older generation would find ways that they could integrate and turn over to that younger generation the farms and for them to be able to raise their families on. They found other ways, other economies to participate in. And I think that's something we really need to take a look at. Is it doesn't do us any good to give the kids an interest and a love and a passion for agriculture if we aren't then able to at least get some of them into successful careers in agriculture.
We're going to run out of time really fast. Thank you, Matt, for sharing tonight. Just got this high sign from Galen. Maybe we'll hear from Ben briefly. Ben. And then we'll see if Brad or Amanda have anything to add, but we have literally just a minute or two left. So go ahead, Galen. You had some thoughts.
Oh, I just wanted to echo that, you know, we have to make a conscious decision where we want our food to come from. If we want safe, affordable food, the decisions that we make today will affect that. You know, based on zoning policies, land use, and when we choose to drive those costs up in our local agricultural production, we ultimately import that food from other regions. And you know, we produce one of the best, cheapest, wholesome products right here locally, and to not take advantage of that just seems foolish.
Ben, go ahead. But I will cut you off this time because we are that tight on time.
Yeah, farmland is just farmland without farmers. We need to be protecting our ability to farm. That's the best way we can preserve our ag lands into the future. America's farmers grow communities, and that's the truth.
Brad Rader, go ahead too. Your last word from you.
Well, I think we've had some great discussion tonight. I appreciate being here. It's, you know, it's a big weight to feel like we're talking for all the farmers in the county. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Hopefully we've heard the fact, or you've heard the fact that we do need to value our food supply, and we are a key part of that here in the county. We are frustrated. We're working through it. We're communicating. We're trying to talk. We just need folks to realize and listen and work with us. That's all we're asking. So thank you.
Amanda, do you have you get the last word tonight from the panel?
That's right.
Yeah. And you have about 30 seconds.
Perfect. I think it's time that we all start coming together and seeing the actual true people that work the fields, that know the fields, telling others where we need help, how we need help, not bookwork people that on paper it looks great. Let's put those practices, let's put them into practice and see how well they work. We're going to find out that we don't have a future if we don't start working together.
Amanda Stidham, Matt Abbott, Ben Ellenboss, Galen Smith, and Brad Rader, our panel here tonight. Give those folks a round of applause for all that they do. And I also want to quickly toss it, Jim, we have just about 60 seconds or so for you to wrap up our evening.
Okay, I just want to thank you, Dylan, for hosting this tonight, for you for coming out in the snow, for the listeners out there to listen to this, and to remember, this is a really, I hate to say this, I really hate to say this, but I have not met a farmer in this county yet that has not expressed exactly what they're saying here. They are afraid. There is not a single one that has said, hey, everything's going good. Every one of them is afraid of what's happening in the future. That's from our regulatory environment to the different challenges that we have from a global market. We want things grown locally. We want things grown here. We want to protect our community. And we here at Common Threads, I just want to, for just a few seconds here, thank again Dylan, thank the Whatcom family farmers, the Farm Bureau, the cattlemen's, the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, Fourth Corner, Asset Advisors, WBA, And let's see, I know there's someone else that I'm missing on here. And of course, the people, the volunteers at Common Threads, to continue on and keep this type of dialogue for you to understand what's happening in our community. Thank you very much, Dylan.
Thank you, Jim, as well, and thank you to Common Threads for having me on stage tonight to run this show and work with these folks. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate these people opening up and talking, and that, I think, is something that's happening that hasn't been happening for a long time, and I think something that's headed in a positive direction is that we have people talking, we have conversations happening, and that's going to be the key to the change that we need for farming to have a future in our community. So I want to thank you, and for those of you on the radio, again, you should be thanking Asset Advisors for making this broadcast possible tonight. We're signing off from Meridian. This is KGMI Bellingham, HD2 92.9 KISM. Did I talk it to the top okay, Joe? Are we still on?